Hey guys, thanks again for tuning in. Just wanted to cover the new deal that's going to be signed between the Taliban and the Trump administration tomorrow, so February 27th. It's going to end the war in Afghanistan after 19 years of fighting, so pretty big if this gets done. I'll go over expectations, but first I kind of want to go over just the Taliban and their history. So, Talib, or at least I think it actually might be Rashida Tlaib's last name when I think about it. It actually means religious student in Arabic. So it takes the plural form of an, which is from Farsi, so that's Persian. So thus you have Taliban, so basically just plural form of religious students, so religious students. They basically just derive from militia groups, from the Mujahideen, which was supported by the CIA in the 1980s. We spent around an estimated $800 million training and arming them through the Pakistanis. But like many countries before, the Soviets attempted to invade and install their own puppet government in Afghanistan. You could go through the list of countries that actually invaded Afghanistan. It comes from, Macedonians, with the Greeks, Persians, Arabs, Mongols, Russians, British. So the list goes on. America's part of that list now. So we'll see actually if we're successful to actually conquer them, kind of like the Persians were successful, the Macedonians were successful, and that's basically about it. But anyway, you have these CIA groups just training Pakistani militants that were training the Taliban. So basically, we were using the Pakistanis as kind of like a corollary, but basically, we sold these weapons to them. We helped them build tunnels, such as the one at Tora Bora, which actually was the one that Osama bin Laden escaped through back in 2001. But naturally, this situation kind of backfired of us funding the Mujahideen to fight against the Soviets during their war in the 80s. As predicted, these militants were now experienced, they were confident, they were indoctrinated, they ended up turning on us. So basically, the bombers in the first World Trade Center attack in 1993 were actually of Afghani origin. So, then you have Osama bin Laden, who actually fought in the Mujahideen. He ended up creating his Al Qaeda later on, but, they ended up allowing him to train in Afghanistan because he actually left, if I recall, to be in Sudan during the 90s and, actually Sudan. So he, was behind the embassy bombings in Kenya, the one in Tanzania. So, he was on our list. But anyway, we wanted them to extradite Osama bin Laden around 2001, 2000. And they said that they wanted to extradite him only to a Muslim country for basically just to go before a Muslim judge kind of thing. But anyway, that's where it stood diplomatically between the Taliban and the United States on September 11th, 2001. Then that happened. So anyway, back to the Taliban. During the civil war that basically happened in the 90s, this was post-Soviet occupation, a movement basically coalesced from Afghan refugee students from madrasas. So those are the religious schools that they have in Muslim countries. So these were kids that were basically, or at least teenagers from Balochistan, which is part of Pakistan. I think I've mentioned and tweeted about them several times, but that's a region that's basically different than most of Pakistan, and they kind of want to leave. There's a whole free Balochistan movement. But anyway, they're from there. They're from the Northwest Frontier Province. But as the story goes, its founder, Muhammad Omar, was basically recruited by a local village to take care of a local guerrilla leader, basically a militia leader, who had raped and killed 3 women. So, he got some guys and they executed the commander and dispersed his militia. So as time went on, there were many different situations that were actually similar and similar in how they were basically, killing women or attacking people. So basically they called on Omar more and more to basically take care of these militia groups. So he began to recruit more people and called for a jihad against those who had wronged their country. So this basically started to grow, this movement, and then they started to protect and charge tolls on major roads. So, many people actually believe Pakistan was behind their funding and development as well. So, again, it's just worth noting that many of them fought as the Mujahideen, but they were also disillusioned by the movement and ended up joining the Taliban. So, in a way, we kind of funded their training and also the tunnels that they were using, and a lot of the weapons that they took from the Soviets derived from our air in funding against the Soviets, if that makes sense. So here you have Pakistan, which is located south, and you have Afghanistan, then you have Turkmenistan up here, and these are vital trade routes that the Pakistanis want access to. They wanted to create some oil pipelines too, and I know that there was an American company that was involved in the 90s. I could go more into a different video about the oil concessions and the oil deals that were trying to be created between these groups. But anyway, they just wanted an easy access route from Pakistan to Turkmenistan, and the Taliban happened to fit that gap. So they basically, funded them. They supported them with aerial strikes, and they ended up taking Kandahar, which was, a major city. And after that, they kept pushing to bigger cities and bigger areas. It's even interesting because people think that Saudi Arabia was involved too, because there was a payment of about 1.5 million that was being sent to local leaders in Kandahar, and without some kind of substantial investment, it seems like it could have been Saudi derived. People aren't sure, but anyway, by 2000, you have the Taliban really controlling the scene. I mean, they took the capital city in 96, so Kabul. So they had ruled the country for a good amount of time by this period before we actually invaded in 2001. But they basically profited from the drug trade, oil trade, their actual irrigation systems that they had set up. But really what people need to understand is they controlled about 3/4 of the opium trade in the world at the time. They did try to reduce it around 2000, but still, the opium trade is still massive coming from Afghanistan. I know that around 90% of that actually goes towards Europe and some of it into the United States. But I have mentioned PKK in other videos too, regarding the Kurds, if you recall, in Syria and Turkey. They're actually a major middleman for the opium trade, for this, I guess, just being the benefactor. They actually have their own processing labs. They control their own trafficking arrangements. But it's just worth noting that the Democrats wanted us to support the PKK, so keep that in mind. The bulk of this trade has lowered over the years, but it's gradually been going up. But anyhow, the Taliban have estimated to earn around 60 to 300 million per year just based off this trade. I would suspect it's more towards the 300 range. But anyway, so once they took over the country by 1996, they really established, a caliph, or at least like a Sharia law kind of state. So they seized all guns, they destroyed roadblocks, they cleaned up the cities. They imposed Sharia law, which meant that women were forbidden to go to work, go to school. They had to wear burqas and the whole, not just hijabs, but the burqa, which covers the whole body. And, they cut off criminals' hands and feet. So if you, stole something, you got your hand cut off. I actually recall my friend who served in Afghanistan. He told me how they would give water to these little kids every day, and suddenly they just didn't show up the one day, and someone told them, oh yeah, the Taliban actually cut their hands off. So these are the kind of things that they do. They cut children's hands off. But anyway, they banned television, they banned music, they banned sports, so no more soccer. Sorry, soccer fans, but you can't play soccer anymore. They expected punctual attendance to the local mosque, and they had their own, basically, Gestapo, too, just enforcing this. So as time went on, the Taliban were settling in, and then, you have Osama bin Laden that came back, and then basically we asked for his extradition, which was declined. So anyway, I just want to talk a little bit more about the peace talks and what's been happening right now. So you have the deputy leader of the Taliban who actually wrote an op-ed piece in the New York Times, which I can't believe that they actually let that fly, but it's the New York Times. So basically, when you read it, you actually are kind of impressed. Like, okay, the writing is excellent, his diction's great, he's very eloquent. And that's basically what the New York Times want you to see and read. He blames the Americans as invaders, but in the end, they're ready for peace. They've been at constant war forever, it seems. But really, it's just meant to fluff up the Taliban and make the us Americans look bad and feel guilty. But let's be real. The Taliban have reaped the benefits of the illicit drug trade, oil trade, human trafficking trade. They housed Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. They caused their own civil war in the 90s, which resulted in tens of thousands of deaths. So what do they expect to happen? As the saying goes, the chicken comes home to roost. The opinion piece promised women's rights, but I highly doubt that they're actually going to follow through with that. Overall, with peace, I expect some kind of two-state solution where the Taliban can retain their land in some cities. And maybe there could be a one government, one nation, where the Taliban are represented in some kind of legislatures, but I would bet on probably the former, though I am curious just to read the actual text of the peace doctrine. So we'll see what happens, but in reality, it's just really incredibly difficult, to have the Afghanistanis actually come together. They're very culturally diverse. They have a lot of ethnic backgrounds. They, have a lot of internal and external conflicts throughout their history. It's just been really incredibly difficult to basically recreate any sense of national unity in Afghanistan. So there's always going to be mountain tribes in Afghanistan, and they want to be independent. There's going to be the Taliban who are going to convince them to not send their women to schools, to basically allow them to continue being stupid. And that's just the fact that remains, and they're an agricultural economy. 85% of the population relies on the agriculture and a lot of humanitarian aid. So now you have deforestation, you have the soil that's degrading, you have literally just the entire land that's laden with landmines. So the future of Afghanistan is just pretty bleak. They need to really rely on trade, focus on creating trade deals with other Central Eurasian countries, and maybe they have some kind of hope. But we'll see what is actually in the deal. I would hope that America gets out. Like, I really do not want 13,000 American soldiers there any longer. It's kind of ridiculous when I think about it. We've been at war with Afghanistan since I was in 5th grade, and now I'm 29. So quite some time. Overall, though, this would be a huge move for Trump. He can say that, he's not a warmonger. He wants peace. And this should really help his election chances come November if he can get this done. And we need some kind of good news after all this coronavirus fever has been going around in the media. Really, the media is just looking to blame that on Trump and being inept on not acting on it. Of course, like all the defunding the CDC, all that stuff. But of course, Trump had been advocating for defunding a lot of programs in the government. So it's no different than him just reducing the size of the government itself. So I hope you like the video, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.